We live on the lower east slope of Mount Helix on the El Cajon side. And our climate is cold where we are. In the winter, we can get into the high 20s, low 30s, and hot in the summer. Over 100 is not uncommon. So we have wide swings of temperatures, and the plumerias have seemed to do really well with it. So they've adapted. And so I want to take you around today so you can see what we've got going here and what I've been doing to get the plants ready for another season of more blooms. So we've been growing here for over 20 years. And so we have some big trees now. Although it's funny, some of them may be 20 years old, but really, when we had the freeze of January 2007, a bunch of them completely died, and then some came back. And so they really kind of started all over. They had roots the age of 20 years, but their growth is really just that 13 years since then. But one of the things I remember a lot of people talking about on Facebook was just how many leaves our plants had back in January and February. And these right here are obviously older plants, trees, and they have really never lost their leaves. But back in January and February, we had a ton more leaves on these. And then early February, we had a huge cold snap that went down to 30 degrees, and it killed most of those off. And then we've had all the storms, March and April, and that has knocked off most of the leaves. The ones that you first saw, like Makanani, Neville's Rainbow, they've never lost their leaves over the years. If you see damage to the tip like that, and that is from a snail. Boy, in the spring, they love the young, tender tips. They're very yummy for them. And here's the thing, without leaves, they can get to them. Once those leaves start, the snails can't get to them. So spring is the time for snails. You got to watch out for those. So either just go through and pick them off every day, or use some good organic Sluggo or other baits that you want. Any kind of bait is going to work. Just spread it around the base of the plant to keep them off. The good thing is that all these older trees, because they're just more mature and better established, we hardly ever have any cold damage on these, even down to the lowest temperatures. Every once in a while, a rotted tip here and there, but really not much. And it's really the younger plants that we have to worry about. Spring and autumn are known for their seesaw weather. And some of that can be a problem for plumerias. So in other words, one week it could be a high of 55, and the next week it could be a high of 80. And so what happens is these new little leaf spikes are coming out. They're very tender, very vulnerable, and then we get 80 degrees, and that happens. They burn. So don't worry about that. New ones will come back. It does not hurt the plant. Obviously, I haven't taken them off. It's not a big deal. They'll fall off here real soon. And also, once blooms start coming out, you may see that again for young blooms as they start coming out, that they'll turn black because they've been sunburnt. So of course, sometimes you get the rotted branch, and it's got to come off. If it's a branch that has traveled all through it, then I need to do it as soon as possible so it doesn't travel down to the rest of the plant. Now, fortunately, most plumeria, the rot will not travel past that elbow right there where it connects with the original branch. But sometimes it does. I've seen it happen. It's happened to me. So here, this has infected the whole branch. So this is all coming off. Wow, this is hard to do with one hand and left-handed. Okay, wow, that was really tough. I'm really weak. Okay, here we go. Off it comes. And you can see it's there, but it's terminated. It hasn't gone anywhere else in the rest of the branch, which is very fortunate. And here's an 8-year-old Galat Sunset Now this tip is rotted, but it terminated just a couple inches down the branch. And so what I'm gonna do is cut this a few inches down below that. You see it's at an angle, so if there is some dew or rain, it'll just run off. But because there's still a chance of rain, I'm gonna seal that with probably a liquid electrical tape that you can get at Home Depot or DAP, and protect that from the water. But you're gonna hear this stuff from Jeff, or maybe you already have, but I'm just letting you know this is part of my spring routine, is to go through and find these branches. This is what I call my evergreen row. And this is the mother of all evergreens, Singapore white. Evergreen means that they're non-deciduous, that they won't lose their leaves over winter, but that's in their native habitat. Here, they might, like they did on the Singapore white. Back there is a Melipa Bowman. This is a hybrid that I got from South Bay, and this is Hong Kong dwarf Singapore pink. And you can see that the leaves, they stayed on just fine, but they get brutalized with our cold weather. So new leaves are coming out, and they will push the old ones off, and we'll be back to a beautiful plant here in a couple months. The best part about dormancy is we really learn a lot about the growth habit or the shape of different varieties. This here is Jean Cecile. It's Roland and Lee's seedling. Beautiful pink flowers. And you can see this is kind of all over the place. There's all kinds of different levels with the branches. Here's Cole's Cooktown Sunset from Australia. And this has just the most beautiful shape and canopy on it in the summer. This is Jim Little's Hawaiian Sunset. And you can see it's just growing way out. It's got baseball bat branches, but it grows very wide. And then there's Kalanani, which, as you can see, is very upright and also has a beautiful canopy in the summer. And then over here, this crazy one is a white called Grape Expectations. And it's really tall, it grows very fast, and it kind of gets all over the place with the branches. You can see some growing downward, and it's not uncommon for some varieties. There's all kinds of differences. And this is our Aztec Gold. Man, we got this from Frank Rodriguez. Gosh, trying to think, almost 15 years ago. And man, it's been a performer. And it's funny, people say that within Aztec Gold there are different growers, probably from seedlings where the blooms look exactly the same. And this is very upright, although there are some branches that grow down, as you can see. And then I'll show you one of the ground growers that's very common. And here is the other Aztec Gold. Exact same bloom, same scent, same leaves, but it's what we call a ground grower. It likes to grow down to the ground. Look at that. And pretty crazy, just something a little different in the DNA, but very different than our upright grower. This is a Kauai Beauty that we were gifted last year. Unfortunately, the original owner had it in a pot and it was laying on its side. And so what happens, like with most plants, are the branches grow up to the sun. And so when I put it in the ground last year, I put it so that the trunk was perpendicular. So over the years, these branches will start working their way back to the west, to my left, so that they can get to the sun. I'm patient. Speaking of growth habits, this is the infamous Gene Moraney Jr., otherwise known as Jeannie Moraney, with its baseball bat thick branches and crazy growth habit. So it's always good to know the growth habit, because then you know how much room to give it from where you put it. And you can see this likes to grow everywhere and grow out and take over the world. And my hunch is that nobody would grow this if it had a white bloom, but the blooms are so worth putting up with this growth habit. This is the corral area. And yes, it was a horse corral when Stacy grew up here. And so obviously really good soil. And I planted 4 plants in here. I probably am not going to plant any more. I don't like to put anything in the ground past like late May into June, because the best protection from cold damage is a well-established root system. So I want to get them in early in the year so that they have time to develop, so that they're protected once winter comes. Here are 2 of the plants that I put right in the front here. These are what are called rainbow grafts. So they have multiple varieties grafted on them. There's a San Marie, a San Miguel, and a Jungle Jack's Marco Polo. And this one has purple rainbow, and it has Kim Schultz. Yes, Kim Schultz is grafted to this plant. Love you, Kim. These are my 2 greenhouses. I really don't use them in the traditional greenhouse sense. It's really used in the winter to just protect the plants from the cold settling on them, like frost and such. And not a lot in here because I've taken them out already. But what I do grow in here year round is mid-cuts. Ones where the tip was cut off because I grafted it, or because it died over winter. And so I put them in here to get new branches. Nothing proven, but I really feel like the heat in here, especially in the summer, pushes these branches a little harder, a little faster. And so I call this my tip farm. So in some cases, some of these tips I'll just cut off and graft them to make new plants, or I'll just let them go and make a new plant in themselves. Here's my other greenhouse, and you might wonder about the fans. The fans are on 24/7, 365. Because basically, in a closed environment, I don't want the air to settle, especially when it's cold and when it's hot. It's just not good for the branch tips. Plus, that air movement keeps bugs from landing on the plants and causing an infestation. Stupidly, last year, I did that. I turned them off for a couple months before the season started and ended up with a whole bunch of spider mites. I had never had any kind of infestation in the past, so that was a lot of fun. So in this greenhouse, I use it for a couple things. Right now, it's just to keep these plants in here that are going to be up potted, put into the next pot size up. So I wanted to keep them inside and dry, so it's going to be a lot easier to do that process. So that's what these are in the process of doing. And then this is also where I put my grafts when I'm done with them. I put them in here until the grafts have completely taken. This is a new thing we planted last year. This is our memorial garden. We got all of these from 2 different people's collections who passed away. And so last year when we got them, we brought them and planted them in the ground back here, and it's a very special place for us where we can enjoy the beauty and remember these great people. So about mid-March, 3rd week of March, I took out all my larger pots, everything that's in a pot larger than 5 gallons. What that tells me is that these are plants that are older, they have a more mature and established root system, and they can take some good rain, which they've had a lot of in March and April. But what it does is it helps to clear out the, hello Mr. Helicopter, it helps to clean out the salt that's built up from using our city water. It's really good for that, that pure rainwater does that. And then just last week I brought out my 5-gallon pots, and boy did they get a good washing this week as well. And so the other reason that I put them out is because I fertilize them, and I want the rain to get the fertilizer all washed in. So what I do is, if I get down there you can see some of it there. There's those little blue beads are fertilizer that I use. It's a slow release called Excalibur, and then I use a couple others. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then I cover it with a mulch on top of it for a couple reasons. One is that mulch stays wet, and what releases the fertilizer in the slow release pellets is being wet. And so that mulch stays wet and it's constantly feeding the plant. I like that, and I don't really have to feed them much at all throughout the rest of the year. I love that. And the other thing is the slow release should not be exposed to the sun, because that cuts the effectiveness of it. So that's why I use the mulch as well. This is my work area where I pot up plants, and this is the fertilizer mix I was telling you about. And this is equal parts Excalibur. That's the turquoise and tan pellets, and that is a synthetic fertilizer that's very balanced. It's got tons of micros and macros in it, and it's 11, 11, 13, so highly recommended. And then the black pellets are another slow release, and that is Milorganite, which is nitrogen based. It is organic. And then the crystal pellets are Epsom salt, magnesium sulfate, which are also organic. Everything I use for the plants are organic, in the soil mix, the mulch, the fertilizers, except for the Excalibur. And I just love the Excalibur because it's formulated for plumerias, gives it a really balanced diet throughout the year. And I only need to put it in once, the 6th month, and I'm done. Put it in March or April and it'll last the whole year. I have tested and tried different mulches over the years as topsoil, and I've landed on one that I really like. It's made by the company Kellogg. They make all organic products. You can find it in some nurseries. You can find it at Lowe's, Home Depot, and such. And the product is called Grow Mulch. It's Gromulch. And it is fantastic. It's got forest products in it and feather meal, and then it's got all kinds of manure in it. And I'll tell you, plumerias do love poop. It really helps them. It gives them a lot of good nutrients. And man, I love this Grow Mulch. It works great. Okay, I'm going to show you how I repot. So I'm going to take about a half a shovel full, put it in there, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to grab some nutrients. Here's some worm castings, some Epsom salt, and some steer manure. Just throw it in there so it gives something for the roots to go toward. Give it some nutritious goodies down there. Hopefully the roots will get excited and head down that way quicker. Put a few more shovelfuls in, and then I'm coming up over here. And actually I'm gonna take a little bit out. Okay, so here's our plant, and I'm gonna give it a little haircut and cut some of the roots. This stimulates them, as was confirmed by the UC Davis professor a few years ago that talked to us, that said this will split the roots and stimulate growth. Anyway, so now we're gonna put it down in here, and I'm gonna put a couple little shovelfuls of more soil in there. And then I'm gonna grab my fertilizer and I'm gonna spread it around. And here's some coffee grounds. I'm just gonna put those around, and some worm castings, and put those around. And then I'm gonna finish filling it up. And I'm gonna do this, put a couple more in like that. And I'm going to press it down. And then I'm gonna put some mulch on top of it. And that's how it's done. Here's a carport that I set up a couple years ago with a sun filter on it from Home Depot. And I use this for rooting. Rooting out here where it gets hot, they really need to be protected from the direct heat that we get here. And so this really helps them, and I had much more success rooting because of that. Now these over here are seedlings that I've just potted up, but these over here are still in the rooting process. Here's what we call gang rooting. Whole bunch of them in one pot that are all of one variety. And so most of those rooted at the end of last year, and this year I will pot them up. This carport is where I have my soils. And boy, best Father's Day present from my kids. This has saved my back and my life so many times, just using a cement mixer. It's awesome. So this is my base soil. We just got a yard about a month ago of it. I use this medium size fir bark, and I use the pumice, large pumice, and then I'll also mix in some manure, compost, that type of thing. And keeps it very well draining. And out here where it's cold, it really helps to have chunky soil so that the soil doesn't compact, because the cold really can kill off the roots, and if it compacts, that makes them die just a little bit faster. Sunburn is not just for humans. That's right. Plumerias can get sunburnt. So you can see some discoloration there through my shadow. And so I've taken the cardboard middle roll from a paper towel in that case and slipped it on there to protect it. And then I also use the same things from toilet paper rolls, which is really valuable these days, and put them around the smaller plants, and that helps to protect them from sunburn. So us Plumeria addicts, yes, we grow Plumeria plants, we grow leaves, but what we really grow is blooms. Isn't that why we're in this? Because we love the flowers. We love the texture and the shape, and of course the fragrance. And I think the best part about Plumerias is they teach us patience, because we have to wait each year, and it is so worth the wait. God bless you all. Hope to see you very, very soon. Be safe and be well from the Atkinsons.